All right, thank you. It means a lot to be here today as an alumni. I remember a lot of classes in this room, so thanks for spending the next hour. So I'm here to share the work of Lake Plato. It's a firm that's acutely focused on creating architecture that celebrates the human experience and creates that human connection between people and the environment. This is our firm's yearly retreat. It's called Lake Plato. We like to say that gathering in Texas in August reminds us about climate and comfort and the importance of water and shade. I think you could also call it trauma bonding, but we all go home with sunburns and knowing each other a little bit better and with a deeper connection to the place that Lake Plato calls home, which is the Texas Hill Country. You probably already know a little bit about Lake Plato, so before I dive into our work, I'll start with a short introduction to myself. I grew up deep in Appalachia, about 2 hours southwest of here. My dad was a coal miner. We grew tobacco. And so that is the place that shaped my love of architecture, tobacco barns, corn cribs, gravel roads. When I got here, my freshman year roommate asked me how I was going to design buildings if I'd never seen a big one. Somewhere along the way, I got to see big buildings. More importantly, it's here that I really learned to learn and learn to enjoy the world and learn from it. Just for fun, these are some of the images from my thesis. I crammed too much on here, so it's too small for you to judge me too harshly. But I was studying house and what that meant to me and the people I knew, and along the way, falling in love with roofs as a symbol of shelter. After school, I went to work for a firm in Portland, Oregon. My first project, understandably, was a house. So I'm working on a house, and the partner I was working with brought in this book for me to reference because it was 2007 and we still looked at architecture in books. And inside that book was the Hill Country Hall. And for the first time, I saw my perspective reflected in architecture that was published work that was in the US. And for me, it was a real moment of realizing that I could dream bigger than maybe I had about who I could be. Because this project was my introduction to Lake Plato, we're going to start here with your introduction to Lake Plato. This is the Hill Country Hall. Like I said, it's an early Lake Plato project. Hall is a Mexican term for lean-to structures, like a shack. Like its name implies, this is an off-the-grid weekend retreat. A thick limestone wall houses all of the messy stuff, like the outdoor shower, the composting toilet, the kitchen. And like a lot of the early Lake Plato houses, it's more porch than house. So the screen living space and the adjacent porch step down the hillside under that simple shed roof. It's oriented towards the prevailing breeze in the summer and faces a creek, while the stone wall shelters the living space from the northwestern winds. Like most of the firm's early work, it's a ranch house. And these ranch houses got to follow a different set of rules than more traditional houses. Style really takes a back seat, and instead it's shaped by place. These houses had to be climate responsive, so they are a collaboration with context. They're shaped by sun and wind and topography and local materials. And you see those threads through a lot of our early work, where we're always learning from vernacular and from the environment, leveraging the materials of place and creating buildings that are a collaboration with context. Sustainability isn't a precious thing in these projects. It's a practical solution to meet the needs of the projects and the client. From those early projects, our work's expanded to include a lot of different market sectors, from residential, or it still includes residential, but now it includes things like schools, civic and cultural, urban development, and higher education, which has been my focus. And it's grown beyond those early Texas projects to projects all over the world. I got to work on a grocery store in the Cayman Islands, which is kind of ridiculous, but also incredible. And as our portfolio has grown, the office has grown, and you see that growth reflected every year in our Lake Plato photo when we all come together. All of these projects and all of those people are all rooted in the shared values of craft, placemaking, performance, and community. Having these values clearly stated and having everyone's alignment with those values means that there's some autonomy that lets us all innovate and bring value and meaning to each unique project. To be successful with each of these values takes deep collaboration with our clients, with building users, with our engineers and landscape architects, our contractors and consultants. And we lead those collaborations with curiosity and joy, making space to listen because good ideas can come from anywhere. These values and our commitment to integrative and collaborative design have proven results. We've received 13 Committee on the Environment Awards, more than any other firm. This is the project award that means the most to us as a firm because it acknowledges both great design and sustainability. And we believe strongly you can't have one without the other. This quote represents to me why both matter. We don't love things because they're non-toxic or biodegradable. We love them because they move the head and the heart. Aesthetic attraction is not a superficial concern, it's an environmental imperative. And I'm sure most of us in this room believe good design can save the world at least a little bit, and I think this starts to represent why. So that was my introduction to Lake Plato. With that, I'll walk through some of our newer projects. These range in scale from location, scale, program type, construction technology, but they're all united by those values of craft, placemaking, performance, and community. The first is the Marine Education Center in Mississippi, then a 3D printed house in Austin, Texas, Amy Gutman Hall, a mass timber building for the University of Pennsylvania. This one's my baby of the ones that are up here. And then if there's time, we'll talk about our renovation to our San Antonio office. So starting with the Marine Education Center for the Gulf Coast Research Laboratory, I'm going to call this GCRL because that's what we called it during the design phases, and it's a lot easier to say. So the white box highlights GCRL's previous building site, pre-Hurricane Katrina. It was located just 4 feet above sea level in an area that sees a lot of hurricanes. And then Katrina came and wrecked the building. The damage created the need for the new project and shaped the way the client thought about resiliency and their responsibility as both educators and land developers. The director of that program is quoted as saying, "All buildings eventually end up in the ocean." And this photo certainly supports that argument. And so one of the earliest goals for the project was to use materials that didn't harm aquatic life. So this project that starts with a not great story about destruction gets to become an inspirational story about building resiliency. The new site is identified in orange. It's set 19 feet above sea level. That's kind of an anomaly in this area, and it did come with some highly sensitive ecologies. And so the process began with studying the land. The team walked the site with people who knew the land best. That was coastal ecologists and biologists. In these pictures, the ecologist is teaching the team about the most sensitive areas of the site. In this case, that's the forested bayhead, which is responsible for filtering all of the water on the site before it enters the tidal marsh and then the bayou. So here's the site. You see the tidal marsh and the forested bayhead, and that's surrounded by pine forest. Building zones were defined based on the elevation related to floodplain, the 500-year floodplain for added resiliency. Then the team walked the site with those ecologists and marked any of the trees in the build zone that were non-native or invasive or at the end of life. These were the trees that are most susceptible to come down in a hurricane. By removing those, it made an impression in the landscape, and those clearings became the build site that the buildings nestled within. Zooming in, we can compare what was designed with what was built. Maintaining this many trees and protecting the sensitive ecologies was a big deal in this region of Mississippi. It's a region where people are so worried about trees falling on buildings that they typically clear-cut huge swaths of land around the building footprint. By removing strategic trees, we could use the strongest trees to be the first line of defense so they become a wind buffer, utilizing the landscape as the first factor of resiliency. A cross-section showing those different site ecologies, the topography and the relationship of the buildings. The pine forest is the first one. The buildings here are placed within the trees to serve as wind buffers. The forested bayhead, our most sensitive ecology. No construction or foundations interact with this zone. The main campus, where the buildings are sited to preserve the native trees and are on piers to avoid disturbing the natural water flow. And then finally, the tidal marsh, where the buildings are elevated with a finished floor of more than 20 feet above sea level. While the team was learning about the site, they were also learning about the local vernacular. You can see all of these projects have really steep pitched roofs. It rains more than 65 inches of rain a year here, so it dumps, and the roofs had to be able to manage that. The team explored more modern interpretations of vernacular and learned from those and how they were aging. And those informed how they thought about the architecture. This is where the entry sequence begins with this covered walkway. The building form is informed by the vertical pine forest. And like most of our projects, you move in the landscape before you enter a conditioned building. There were a lot of lessons from Katrina for this client. One of those was that the structures needed to be repairable and that material needed to be readily available. So all of the structure is designed using dimensional lumber that you can get from the hardware store, so nothing bigger than a 2x12. It's also the southern yellow pine that's the same as the forest. A pencil sketch that was used to share the early design with the client. That covered walkway takes you to an exhibit space, and even these interior spaces are engaged with the context of the site. There are spaces to learn outside, to bring people together. The spaces between our buildings and the spaces they frame are just as important as the buildings themselves. This photo shows a group of school kids that just crossed the forested bayhead. Their journey every day connects them to this place and to its ecologies. Some of these outdoor roof spaces are pretty tall and could feel too dark. It was important to create moments to introduce light to help these spaces be more humane and balance the light levels, so skylights are introduced at their peaks. Another view of that learning courtyard, looking towards that suspension bridge that crosses the forested bayhead. On the site, exhibit space is the first space. Private office space is tucked further back, and then semi-public and semi-private spaces are more dispersed across the site. We looked at the entry and the exhibit space and the learning courtyard. Now we're going to jump to the pedestrian bridge that spans the forested bayhead. It's a 2,000 feet cable suspension bridge, 2,200. I added a zero. The team sought out a bridge builder that works in remote areas. So they helicopter in all of the parts and use only hand tools to assemble the bridge, so there's no need for heavy machinery to be a part of this sensitive site. The bridge connects the buildings and connects the land and is a regular part of the experience of moving through the site and through a visitor's day. And last, the classroom buildings. The West classrooms include spaces to teach outside. The screen porches are pointed in to help create a sense of community and curiosity. Some of the working sketches that the team used as they were working through how the trusses would work. Not every sketch has to be beautiful or precious. Sometimes they just need to help you think through a problem. How each of the buildings relates to the site and the different ecologies shape the building forms. The building on the main campus are elevated and placed on the ridge so the original water flow could be maintained, allowing water to flow into the forested bayhead and be cleansed before entering the tidal marsh. The piers are set in from the slab edge to minimize the impact and gain a little extra space between them and any tree roots, in addition to allowing for that continuous water flow. The concrete slab provides weight to protect from uplift, from all of those hurricane winds, but it also had to be designed strong enough to support the weight of cranes and heavy machinery, because this was the only laydown yard that the contractors got to work from. So preserving all of those trees on that site meant this was their work zone. A few other pictures from around the campus. And then the dust shot again, because everybody loves a dust shot. So from that, we're going to shift to our 3D printed concrete house. Lake Flato was engaged by Icon, a company that's developing 3D printed concrete technology. The CEO and founder is a showman, and so he asked us to make the most beautiful house using 3D printed concrete, and so that he could use that to kind of invite people to stay as he's showing them the technology. This house is located in a residential neighborhood in Austin, Texas. The neighborhood's dominated by single-story bungalows, all pretty modest in size, so this little house feels right at home there. This was a new material to us, so the team spent a lot of time with Icon learning about the material and how to work with it. One of our team members is a graduate from UVA, and if there's one lesson everyone from UVA leaves with, it's an understanding that curvy walls can be more stable than straight walls. And so they played with curves. 3D printed concrete lends itself to functional and rational curves. And you can see those curves being realized in the plan. The team made the design decision not to print everything, to only print the elements that brought the most value from the concrete. So they printed the envelope. The exterior walls leverage the inherent material properties of that 3D printed concrete. It's durable and it weathers well. And then they used wood where it was most efficient, and that makes up most of the interior walls. While the concrete's mostly used on the exterior, there are flourishes that bring that concrete into the interior and let it be celebrated. And you see that most clearly in the 3 big barrels on the plan north. And those 3 barrels that you can see in the plan, this is what they look like from the exterior. The team pushed the limit of what they could do with 3-dimensional curvature at this time, and that helped create that almost tree-like trunk form. This is a view towards the dining room where you can see that the concrete barrels paired with the wood interior. The wood was used to contrast and celebrate the concrete. Wood is what Lake Plato really brought to the table. In our opinion, it's the balance of wood and concrete that make the space truly successful. Each material gets to celebrate its own inherent qualities. A section through that house. With the concrete, we were able to create high-performance exterior walls. Those paired with other passive and active strategies. I think the MEP spine that you can see in the diagram was especially effective at solving the practical need of routing all of that mechanical and keeping it organized in an elegant, uncluttered way. The printed concrete forms a cavity, and that receives the insulation. Windows form a break point between the interior and exterior walls, so we have a thermal break. No moisture or heat is coming through. And this is what that detail looks like under construction, the jamb for the window, both in construction and as the construction detail. Windows are floor to roof, so we didn't have to try to create a header out of that 3D printed concrete. So we're not forcing the concrete to do something that it doesn't want to do. This is what the house looks like fully printed after 10 days of printing. The rest of the house finished on a more typical timeline. And so I get to catch my breath and just share some pretty pictures. You've seen this one already, but I like it, so I'm sharing it again. Further down the facade to the patio. In these photos, you can see the character of the place and the irregular bumpiness of the concrete and the warmth of the wood. If you look, you can see the strategy for locating things like outlets and lighting, always staying off of the concrete walls, finding their home instead in the floor slabs or the roof or the wood walls. The interiors, we're standing under that mechanical spine that so effectively organizes the systems, and we get a nice balance of light from the skylight, or light monitor above it. The project tested different finish options. In the bathroom, a plaster finish got to be directly applied to the printed concrete walls, giving a more refined and finished way that still celebrates the curves of the concrete. Again, giving Icon the ability to showcase their material different ways. And one last shot of the interiors. So from that, we're going to jump scales to our project at the University of Pennsylvania. Completely different scale, dramatically different context in West Philadelphia. This is a project for the School of Engineering and its new home for data science and AI. Early goals for this project really shaped the design, that it be use process as an identity, that it be a home for students outside of class, that it really treat people as a primary resource, and that it address embodied carbon and biophilia to help be a better steward of the environment and support human wellness. The project site was a parking lot backed by a parking garage to the north, housing all around that to the east, south, and west. It's a really tight urban site. To meet the building's programmatic needs, we needed to maximize all of that building footprint on the site. So the building's 6 stories with the long facade facing south. The lower 2 floors are instructional space and student collaboration space. The upper 4 floors are graduate research. And on the 3rd floor, a student commons connects those floors, becomes an anchoring student space in the building. And you can see that programming reflected in the massing. It was important to the university and to us that the building engage the street and contribute to the urban fabric, but none of their programs could actually engage the street. So with no activating program, the landscape and architecture had to do that work. The lower floors are pulled in to create space for landscaping at the building edge, and along the way hold space for pedestrians. Our landscape architect on this project was also a Virginia Tech graduate, Will Belcher. We only have about 18 feet for him to work with, and most of that was sidewalk, and he still designed the shit out of it, so he was amazing. And Will created an experience that is a joy to walk through and helps bring the exterior of the building to life. On the upper 4 floors are the research centers. We used mullion fins to add scale and depth and variation to an otherwise very long, flat facade. And these change dramatically throughout the day as the light changes. On these upper floors, themes of biophilia and technology are extroverted on the building's facade in the form of a custom frit that also helps improve some of the building performance by reducing solar heat gain. That frit also helps us disguise a lot of spandrel panels that we use to gain additional performance from the facade. The frit was developed in collaboration with an artist, Andrew Cudless, using computational design. It evokes natural analogs like wood grain and leaf veins, as well as digital patterns like circuit boards and network mapping. Andrew had used computational design to develop the frit, and that strategy resonated deeply with the School of Engineering. I skipped too fast. Is it going to go back? You can see how the building sits on the site in this tight urban context. To be able to build in such a tight urban site, we leveraged a lot of prefabrication. That came in the form of mass timber, it came in the form of unitized curtain wall, and then as some of the concrete facade, precast concrete facade elements. Views of what that exterior looked like from the design rendering through construction, and then on to the finished, completed photo. She's moodier in real life. I think that's good. The lobby has visual connections to the street with ample access to natural daylight. It showcases the building structure, that mass timber. There's visibility into spaces that surround the lobby to create a sense of community and invite people to be curious. When we talked to students, they wanted to be able to connect to the environment, the urban environment, but we're really worried about what this space might be like to work at night when there was more visibility in. So we kind of made this scale a little bit smaller, a little more intimate, and pushed that student commons up to the 3rd floor where they would be more comfortable collaborating at all hours. Because our building plan is so tight and so efficient to create relief and strengthen connections between the buildings, it opens up vertically as we move between floors. That's our purple areas. And those purple areas are paired with shared resources like coffee, resources that help magnetize those spaces and bring them together. Another view of that lobby, which is one of our first 2-story spaces. It's organized with things like the labs that do the fun stuff arranged around the space to help activate it. And then from the 2nd floor, you're always invited to see up or through or down or across. You're invited to move and explore. On the upper floors, research labs share 2-story interlocking spaces. Those are populated with collaboration, again connected with food and drink to create a visual connection between floors. If anybody's doing deep research into code analysis, these are each 2-story spaces, so we avoid creating an atrium, which is probably a level of detail you don't want to know yet, but it saved a lot of money. In a building that prioritizes people, shared space should be the best space. And so the project zoned the program within the building to leverage light and light quality. Spaces with potential for high glare are the more transient spaces on the building edge, while spaces that are deeper in the building with less access to light hold more of our AV-heavy meeting rooms. There is 100% access to daylight and views in the regularly occupied shared spaces on the upper floors. This is that student commons on the 3rd floor. When we tour the project now, it's heavily populated by students that don't even have classes in the building. And some of them aren't even engineering students. And when we ask them why, their answer is almost always the light. Intuitively, most of us understand the biophilic role that using wood has in a building and has on building occupants. Beyond intuition, the presence of wood has been studied to have meaningful and measurable impacts. Things like lower heart rate and increasing creative performance. In studies, even participants who expressed a dislike for wood saw a boost in perceptions of comfort and lower blood pressure. So you don't even have to like wood to get the physical benefits. So that's one of our biophilic strategies. The use of mass timber is one of our most significant biophilic strategies. It allows us to achieve biophilic goals while in an innovative, integrated, and efficient way also address carbon. The embodied carbon of Amy Gutman Hall and timber is a 70% reduction in the baseline building when compared to a baseline building of concrete and steel. When I went to school, we did not learn about embodied carbon. Does everybody know what embodied carbon is? No. So embodied carbon, operational carbon is the energy that our buildings use when they're operating, so mechanical systems, our lighting. Embodied carbon is all of the energy that gets used to build our buildings, so in mining it and transporting it. And as our buildings get more and more efficient, we can make more of an impact now with embodied carbon. I feel like that was a poor explanation, but it's a little bit of one. So in these images, you see the express mechanical systems and structural systems celebrating the engineering. You can see the custom frit. We believe strongly in the architecture of choice and diversity of space and how that supports a diverse student population and neurodiversity. You see that architecture of choice reflected in even the furniture so that people can have a range of places to work and collaborate. More of the spaces within the buildings. These large spaces are, large projects are long. I started working on this in 2019, and there's this magical moment when people finally start moving in and get to enjoy your project. So it's nice to have moments when somebody is scribbling on chalkboards about how much they love your building. This is my reminder to pause and check the time. To see if we've got time for the renovation or if we want to keep going. Okay, so office renovation. The renovation of our San Antonio office was an opportunity for us to hold ourselves accountable to the same standards that we hold our clients to. Our office is right downtown in San Antonio. It's a block north of the Alamo. The building was built in the 20s as a car dealership and gives it some of the warehouse bones that you'll see in later photos. Lake Plato moved into the building in 1985. The firm was started in 1984, so it's been the home for the firm for a long time. This is what it looked like when I joined the firm, thanks to Google Street View. Trees have been planted, but mostly it looks just the same. You can see our front door to the left, and then our sad little parking garage to the right. This is what that parking garage looked like before the renovation. It smelled like bat guano because there were bats. And in truth, the main building smelled like bat guano too. There was columns for one bad day from being knocked over and having the whole thing fall in. Despite all of that, it was still our best gathering space. We're not fancy. And this is what it looks like now with that garage facade opening up into the courtyard. So that's our new front door. Demolishing the garage gave us the opportunity to celebrate the outdoor space as something just as important as indoor space, and it transforms the way we get to occupy the building. So now we get to enter a landscape before the building, like so many of our projects, and it's gotten to become a place of gathering at a lot of different scales. After a long day, that courtyard is a nice place to go take a Zoom call. And some renderings of what that looked like as we were working through the design. The reception area is now connected to that courtyard with new openings in the facade. The wood slat ceilings are actually salvaged from that old garage. It also is a chance for us to celebrate craft and design in our office. So we've got art from regional artists. We also have reclaimed materials that got to use for furniture that were fabricated by local craftspeople. And again, some of the renderings that were used as we were developing the design. We got to create a new, better kitchen that has also become our family room. So it accommodates up to 70 people to host firm wine events, and it's got the technology to support having people join us remotely. More importantly, behind us in this photo are doors that spill out into the courtyard. With the space, we've created initiatives and habits that help us increase our engagement and help us build a stronger community. So every Wednesday, each studio takes a turn making salad that is served for the whole office that we eat in the kitchen. And for a little while, we even hosted a farmer's market. We host art, so the office serves as a gallery for local artists to share their work. It's displayed for a year before it's changed out and a new round of work comes in. Those artists get to host lecture for us and host different events, so it's a really special way, again, for us to connect with our larger community. Once upon a time, the office looked like this. It was a long time ago. By the time I got there, it looked like this. Not the most inspirational place to work, but it was a good place to get things done. And now we have more efficient desks, and we're all hoteling, so even Ted Flato and David Lake don't have assigned desks. This allows us to reorganize as needed to support collaboration on different project teams. The more efficient desk space also gave us a lot more square footage to expand our own collaboration space. The renovation created more opportunities for gathering, for collaborating. The courtyard gave us the opportunity to open up previously opaque walls so those spaces get the benefit of more light. And this was really our opportunity to embrace accountability. So along the way with the renovation, we've gotten our B Corp certification, we've gotten our WELL certification, and we're in the process of getting our net zero carbon certification. So that's our office, and that's the end. Thank you. I think.
Thank you. All right, we've got plenty of time for questions. I can bring you the mic.
What I find most inspirational about the lecture that you gave is that I can immediately see the impact of all the, I'll say buzzwords for lack of something
Yeah.
else, but that you have goals and you reach them, and I can see how each of these goals, like community and sustainability, have made their way into your final design, and they didn't get lost along the way. I'm sorry, I don't have a question.
Thank you. I would say that we do begin our process with setting goals, not just internally, but with our clients. So they've set the goals with us, they're their goals, and that does make it a lot easier to keep them from beginning to end, because it's not something we're telling them they should do, it's something they've decided with us that they should be doing.
Since I still have the mic, I'm wondering what you do to represent, I've seen it, but what do you do to represent your values in the way that you show your designs?
That is a good question. I think we show it more in the way we talk about our design. Despite the lack of site plans in the in the presentation, we are always thinking about site and drawing through site plans. I think more than representing it, the way we're talking about it and the way we're developing ideas with the consultant team, with our partners, probably is how those get reflected more, so that we're not relying on the drawings. They're the tool to communicate it and to get it built. But for the big ideas, I think it's a much, much bigger conversation than can be held just in the drawings.
So in your presentation, you showed 4 projects which are each at fairly different scales. So I wanted to ask how you managed to maintain the same values and firm identities working in very small scale versus very large projects.
Yeah, I think by saying what's important out loud, it lets people kind of apply it to every project. Different contexts. I think it's hard to design to values if you don't know what the values are. So we do pinups, we have conversations, but everybody is joining each project knowing that those are things that we're working towards and knowing that those are the things we'll be having conversations about through each process.
A related question. So residentially, you're known for there's a lot of recognizable style to Lake Plato's residential projects, and one of those things is the pavilion type approach.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure you noticed this maybe without even noticing it. This you separate the program out and have this pavilion approach that does many things, but it allows you to make very good use of your site as well. Related to Julia's observation and question, how do you, I imagine that's a big challenge to do something like that when you have a more tight site and a program that maybe doesn't lend itself to being disaggregated as much.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah, I would say different climates also make disaggregating a lot harder. Like colder climates, that's a bigger cost for energy. We iterate a lot. I don't know what a better answer for that is.
Your Beckman
Yeah.
section showed that a lot.
Yeah, that you have to think about things more vertically, or you kind of test different ideas. Yeah, I don't know. But vertically, I think, is definitely one way when we can't pull it apart and create those spaces.
I have a question.
Is it going to be easier than that one?
I don't know. The third image that you showed of your office, it seems so neat and tidy.
Yeah.
So where does the messiness?
The messiness happen.
Yeah.
So that was a photo right when we were moving back in. And there was this instant when we moved in, and we're like, "Are we fancy now?" We're still not fancy. We've started cluttering it up. We do all have lockers, so we can cram personal stuff into those. We've got a lot of project library areas, and those by far are the messiest, especially as projects are under construction. You're getting all of the samples that you have to review. Those very quickly become all of the mess you would expect to see in an architecture office. But the desks have actually stayed pretty clean. People are pretty responsible about picking their stuff up and putting it away at the end of the day. So it's a lot more managing the physical materials as we're talking about what our buildings are made out of. That's the harder thing to keep tidy.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
It just seems so.
It's very, yeah. It's, things have started to find their way onto desks that don't migrate back into the lockers, but it's stayed pretty good.
Incredible overall. Thank you so much for showing us.
I think
Turn
you
the
need to
mic
turn it
on,
off.
Bob.
One more time. Incredible work. Thank you so much for sharing the diverse range here. This image kind of perfectly captures it. I think I love your work particularly because I think you balance what's inside and what's outside very well. And that notion of like coming through the landscape or coming through the porch and maybe balancing
Yeah.
Versus something?
We're always trying to program the landscape, so I think the answer is yes. We're trying to pull people outside and engage that landscape, and it usually starts with really programming what that can be and what that looks like and how that supports other missions of the program kind of within the building. Yeah, so really thoughtfully understanding how what we can do on the exterior can strengthen the interior, I think tends to also get more client buy-in for doing maybe a little bit more with the landscape than they might typically do. And when we can build those stories, they're also less likely to value engineer it back out, so it's good too.
Maybe in the second thing, like, do you find it's a way to kind of balance a budget constraint sometimes? I mean, obviously, in Texas, what country is different than
Yeah.
Washington.
You know, usually we like to start with integrated solutions to things so that every strategy is solving 3 or 4 problems and not just one. Those are usually the most cost effective in addition to getting like better performance, and then they're hard to value engineer back out too. So integrated solutions are usually our strategy for hitting budget and doing all the artful, poetic things too.
Great, listen, thank you very much.
Is it on? I can't hear. Well, first of all, thank you very much for coming for presenting. From that area, have visited a number of these projects. We're sort of hoping you talk about the HEB.
Yeah.
The best grocery store.
Everybody who's from Texas is indoctrinated to love HEBs. Yeah.
But a few years ago, we had Marlon Blackwell, and at the end of his talk, I asked him a question about whether or not he saw himself as sort of part of something larger. In other words, and does he have, sort of direct connections or see himself in that way? Is there some kind of common discussion going on potentially between individual firms? He didn't really kind of take to that idea, but one of the firms that I mentioned that might be comparable would be Lake Flater. And so my question is, within Lake Flater, is it that discussion where you would position is maybe the wrong word, but sort of have alliances or common goals, or want to move architecture in a certain direction that not only your firm but other firms are sharing as an objective?
I think we really enjoy engaging the larger community for a lot of different conversations. I mean, sometimes it's how we all manage going back to work and working in an office post-COVID, performance conversations, and how we can continue to evolve high-performance design. The same is true for the way we use technology, from BIM and how we're rendering things. So I think we have enjoyed being able to participate in bigger conversations with firms. We're part of a global design alliance, but we're also pretty active in conferences, because I think, those were all really technical things, but from a design perspective too, we enjoy conversations with other architects. I think our practice, because we work so nationally, we are also partnering with other architects a lot, so that we have a local presence when we've got a project, say in Pennsylvania or in Montana. And that gives us even more opportunities to have deep conversations, not just about design, but about practice, and be part of a bigger design culture.
Going back to the project you showed at University of Pennsylvania, the engineering building, how did you address being on that corner plot, and how did that change your building design?
It's a really long, skinny site. I think one of the other things that the university, one of their stipulations at the very beginning was that the building could only have one entry. So that for security and all the things. So that really shaped it. So how we leveraged that corner and what that meant for the point of entry all helped shape it. Screening the garage was a big part of that effort and how we did that and still maximize most of the site. What else? We don't have any photos of that skinny facade that's on the other side of the corner, but it's a really kind of elegant, skinny elevation. It did let us open up more of that side to some pretty precious views. I think that corner probably impacts the interior even more than the exterior, as those spaces that occupy that corner always feel the most precious as they get the views down the street and through the context. I could have included one more project. I talked too fast.
How big is Lake Plato?
We're 150 people. We've got our San Antonio office. That's our historic home base. That's around 120. We've got another group of people in Austin. My math isn't going to add up. That's probably about 30. And then we just started a Portland office that's inching up towards 10 people. So it's nice. It means that we've got a great group of architects, interior designers, urban designers, but we've also been really intentional about a design performance team. So we've got the support that we need to navigate kind of building performance conversations, and then we've got a great team that helps with design technology.
Do you have an internship program?
We have an internship program. Usually we like to take folks for 9 months to a year so that they get a really meaningful relationship, kind of a deeper engagement on a specific project, so they're not just kind of doing renderings here and there. But we love having our interns. I think it helps support a culture of teaching and learning too, so that as soon as you're in the firm, you're already learning how to delegate and have design conversations and teach what you've just learned to someone else who can be supporting the project.
So forgive me to follow up though, but if it's a 9 months to a year, where does that fit in terms of students' education? Is it right after or in between, or how do you?
Yeah, so if folks are between graduate or undergraduate and graduate, that's a good time. Some schools have a program where they have a residency and we get to claim them for, say, a summer and a semester. For a school like this one, it would probably be between.
We do that.
Does that mean we get to take them?
In our fourth year,
Yeah.
students can do 1 semester for academic credit as a professional intern.
Yeah.
And being able to maybe do it in the spring or continue into the summer would be an ideal fit.
Yeah, great.
I
Sold.
was told about it yesterday.
Just saying.
Since you graduated from this program and now are doing great work and have been in the field for a while, do you have any advice for our students on the transition from this lovely oasis of architecture into the real world?
I don't know about for the transition, but I think just as you're going out into the world, I think the more we can show up for each other and elevate each other, I think people know that, and you get a reputation for being good to work with, and your network grows. So work hard and be nice to people, which is really contrived, but also I feel like really true, at least at Lake Plato. Yeah.
I have a follow-up. So what's your advice to fifth-year thesis students? Right now.
Oh, because it's hard, guys. I'm sorry. Yeah, I graduated in 2007, right before the recession, and it's no fun if you've got a complicated world to go enter. Stick with it. The first job's the hardest. Once you get that one, you can start growing your network. Yeah, fight for it. I don't know. The first one's the hard one.
How about getting through thesis? Do you have any recommendations about how to get through thesis? Since you went through it.
I don't know. I feel like I didn't do it the way other people did it because I need sleep. So I was pretty regimented about doing my work and then going home and then getting up early and doing it some more. So regulate yourself. I think that maybe is my advice.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I think those are some of the prettiest pictures I've ever seen in my life. I was curious, so you showed that map at the beginning of all the kind of locations you guys have worked on. I don't know how many of those you've done, but I'm curious which locations or projects have kind of given you guys the most hard of time or run for your money, maybe when it comes to uploading that core value, bringing the outdoors in, or vice versa, or keeping the outdoors at the center of your architecture. Because I'd imagine, you know, if you're in a kind of nicer climate, it's a lot easier than maybe some of the other locations you guys on that map.
Yeah, bugs make a difference too. Yeah, I think there's been a little bit of a learning curve as we've moved into colder climates, not just from bringing outside in, but bringing out materials from outside to inside. There's a learning curve for thermal breaks for steel for us and how we design envelopes for that. But I think we used to say that there was a porch zone where people like porches. That's probably where Lake Plato made sense. And then once you got north of the porch zone, maybe less so. I think as we've pushed north, you know, people in Montana like to be outside too, and it's cold there, but it's hot in the summer, and I think it's translated pretty nicely to a lot of different places. I think one of the bigger challenges is when people see something that makes a lot of sense in one climate and they want to translate it really literally. When you see people moving without screens in California from outside to inside, and then they're in Texas and they're going, I just want to open these doors and have everything be this way, and we're going, the mosquitoes will carry you away, don't do it. Humidity is different, and that changes some of our responses to things. So I think it doesn't keep us from doing it, but it maybe tunes the conversations a little.
Hi, thank you for your presentation.
Where are you?
Right.
There.
Just a question on the structure of the office. It's a pretty large one, and you have a lot of projects going on. What does the teams for each project look like, and how much input does each person really have?
Yeah. So we are, I guess, first for the big firm, we're organized into studios that are kind of roughly organized by market sector. But there's always variation within that based on different client relationships. So that kind of breaks down this bigger office into nice little neighborhoods. On a project teams, there's usually a partner, associate partner that's helping establish design direction and somebody to help manage it. But then we're really relying on our youngest staff to draw and test. So someone might have said, look, we think this is the idea, go. That we're looking for those people to go, okay, I tried it this way, this is what worked, this isn't what worked, and these are the 3 other things I tried, so that we can have conversations about that. That applies to concept design, and then it goes all the way through. So, right, at some point it's going to be more and more focused to go, look, the duct works here, it can't go there, and I think this is what this means for this guardrail detail. So we're really, the young people are the ones controlling the computers and really drawing through it. So you guys get a lot of responsibility to test and develop ideas. And we try to make space for everybody to be a part of the design conversation. When we go into pinups, we try to really focus on kind of not just what's going well, but really go, this is what the team's challenged with. Whole office, come help us. And so really support a design conversation that lets us keep improving projects.
Hi, going back to House Zero, I was curious if you could talk about maybe I don't know if you guys had any prior experience with 3D printing, but the water management strategy for the walls, and if 3D printing is something that you would experiment with again.
Yeah. I think we continue to have conversations with Icon to continue to experiment with it. It was our first project, so that was all very, very fresh, all an experiment. The concrete itself forms a pretty nice barrier, but concrete's not waterproof. Spray foam is what's filling that cavity, and that does create a pretty nice barrier between the exterior and the interior, and then the really thoughtful detailing around those window jambs. So the concrete's protecting that, but the spray foam's really doing a lot of that moisture management. I'm looking for the building science expert to see if I said anything wrong.
That's the most detailed presentation I've ever seen on the 3D printed stuff. So I was actually very interested to see your window details. And I thought your comment on, that maybe my students picked up on being the height of the window, full height, so that they're not, and I don't know if you noticed in the section, did you see the wood kind of buried in the jam there instead of hidden? Kerry's point was that they're not kind of asking the porous concrete to do something that concrete doesn't naturally like to do very much or very well. So that was a very interesting, thank you for showing that, for getting into so much detail.
Yeah.
Last call. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.